In the 3rd century, the Roman trireme was the most powerful weapon. The Roman trireme was an advanced ancient naval vessel with full speed and maneuverability. Armed with a bronze ram at the prow, it was a formidable weapon in naval.
Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today we are checking out a video from the channel Doctor Explained. Now, this channel has 39,600 subscribers, about 100 videos, and he has a lot of videos which appear to have to do with at least some aspects of history, including military history. And the video in question we are responding to today is called The Most Powerful Weapon of Every Century. So, of course, very pertinent to this channel, I suppose. Now, before jumping in, I want to say this. I had a brief look at the video and it is a complete utter mess. With that being said, it doesn't mean that now we need to go gang up on him and spam his comment section with hate. And of course, I do not condone any form of harassment towards this creator, simply because one might say military history isn't his forte. But then again, we're here to correct a few things, and I think that's enough. We don't need to go and spam hatred. Also because having a channel much smaller than mine, it would be like bullying because he couldn't really retaliate, and I don't think that that's decent. Alright, let's go.
In the 1st century, the Roman pilum was the most powerful weapon. The Roman pilum was a versatile weapon used by the Roman army, consisting of a wooden shaft and an iron head, typically around 2 meters in length. It was designed to bend or break upon impact, making it difficult for the enemy to throw it back. The pilum was thrown in a specific manner to maximize its effectiveness, with the spinning motion increasing its accuracy and force. This made the pilum a deadly and important weapon in Roman warfare.
Okay, so that was 1st century. I'm just going to let him speak, end a small little chapter, and then I'll provide commentary. But probably the first thing that I would do in this case is really define what we mean by powerful when discussing the most powerful weapon. Are we saying most powerful weapon in the sense of penetrative power based on contact mechanics? Are we talking about anti-armor capabilities, damage capability to the human body, number of casualties? Are we taking into consideration ease of mass production, ease of use, versatility? I mean, most powerful in what sense? Well, we'll keep it a little broader for this video's sake, I suppose. But yeah, the Roman pilum is an effective weapon. It's an amazing weapon. It was very, very decisive in 1st century Europe. But then again, is it the most powerful weapon that they had access to? Debatable. At least the pilum is a good choice as a weapon.
2nd century, the Roman scorpion was the most powerful weapon. The Roman scorpion was an ancient artillery weapon used by the Roman army, resembling a large crossbow mounted on a tripod or carriage. It was capable of launching bolts or arrows with significant force and accuracy, often used in siege warfare to breach fortifications or in open battles to disrupt enemy formations.
Okay, first I hate the background music. I hate the background. Alright, so this is actually a great opportunity to jump into a topic that I personally find absolutely fascinating and very, very deep, and that is the topic of what the Romans called in Latin tormenta, so war machines. He volunteered a piece of information that I think is crucial to this. Look at this pinned comment. He says, this is an AI ranking, not my ranking. Right, now that I know that, I will have no mercy towards the list. I'm gonna destroy it. Now, his own community doesn't seem to be appreciating that choice, so just as a little piece of advice, friendly piece of advice, I get the desire to make a lot of content quickly, but AI and history isn't the way to do it. Now, the fact that the AI completely botched the job when it comes to this is really good because, of course, I know that people will be like, why are you even wasting your time? No, I am, because I think this is great, because we can take these erroneous statements, put them into context, and use it as an opportunity to learn a thing or two about an otherwise fascinating topic. Now, of course, whenever we talk about war machine, we should really make a distinction, a line in the sand between war machines used during siege warfare and war machines used during open field battle, because those are two very different topics. And I've got a few sources that I want to bring up when it comes to the idea of using these machines specifically against enemy fortifications. I think I know the quote that the AI used to make this statement, and it is incorrect, and I'll tell you why. But I think the first thing that puzzles me when it comes to the choice of the Roman Scorpio is the century. And that is because 2nd century is very late when it comes to the idea of using war machines like this as a representative. Already rather complex war machines and artillery were introduced in the 5th century BC in the Mediterranean world, and I think a good historical context to that would be the conflict between Carthage and Syracuse. And I think it's really interesting to mention that one because it introduces a third category of war machines. So we talked about the siege war machines. So when the attackers are using machines to help them destroy or deal with the battlements of a specific enemy fortification, we've got the sort of war machines used during open warfare and battlefield combat. But then you also have mural artillery. So the sort of war machines that were used defensively on top of battlements. And there are two other examples that we find in Livy that speak about that precisely. One would be the siege of Capua by the Romans in 211 BC, when several Scorpio and ballistae were placed and mounted on top of the main gate, and they were used to shoot. But probably the most interesting one and mind-blowing when it comes to this is it happened in 205 BC, and is when Hannibal sieged Locri. The enemy had mounted Scorpio on top of the battlements, and they see Hannibal and they shoot at him, and they almost hit him, in the sense that Pliny tells us that Hannibal manages to dodge it at the last second. They almost one-shot Hannibal, which really speaks about the accuracy of early Scorpio and in general ballistae and all these sort of classical antiquity war machines, but also how good the crew or the personnel was when it comes to operating them. So it is a good choice, it's just the time period that is weird, because by the 2nd century this would have been in place and in deployment for 700 years.
Often used in siege warfare to breach fortifications or in...
Okay, so that is wrong. Let me show you why. The idea of Scorpio, onagers, and all these type of weapons used to destroy specifically city walls or fortifications and battlements is a highly debated one. And I think what the AI is using as a basis for this was the statements made by the historian Crump. Because in his examination of Ammianus Marcellinus and his siege, he did make this statement. To paraphrase him slightly, but he basically said that the Scorpio or the onager, we actually don't exactly know because I'll tell you more about the nomenclature in a second, but in general, a Scorpio was used to crumble enemy fortifications. The thing is, though, that this now, it's a very old statement. I mean, Crump as a historian was operating and publishing in the 70s, and this is something that has been attacked multiple times by other more proficient historians, also because Ammianus Marcellinus doesn't say it. So it was just a speculation on the part of the historian. And I, for one, having read a bit about Roman military tormenta, I want to say, yeah, no, I don't think they were used to destroy enemy fortifications, particularly when it comes to stone walls. What we are told by the sources, however, is that the fire from the Scorpiones would crush the heads of the Persians and destroy, shatter the siege towers. Picture that one. So these things packed a punch. For sure.
In the 3rd century, the Roman trireme was the most powerful weapon. The Roman trireme was an advanced ancient naval vessel with 3 levels of rowers, enabling remarkable speed and maneuverability. Armed with a bronze ram at the prow, it was a formidable weapon in naval warfare.
Okay. Trireme. Oh my gosh, AI. That's why you don't want to deal with AI. But what's insane about the AI choosing this for the 3rd century, is that the trireme is an ancient war vessel. Early introductions into the Mediterranean basin, we are talking 7th century to 4th century BC at least. It was used by Phoenicians, it was used by the Romans, it was used by clearly the Greeks and the Carthaginians. Saying that a trireme would be the most powerful weapon, I don't even know how it's a weapon, but what have you. To say that that's the most powerful weapon in the 3rd century means that for 1,000 years, nothing has been made that was better than that. Oh my gosh, freaking AI. Now, the reality is, even if we want to kind of excuse the idea of it's not really a weapon, we want to say, but what about war vessel, maritime civilizations? Then already in the 4th century BC, we have the creation of a new type of vessel called quinquereme, or quinqueremes, which is the same thing but bigger and with 5 rows of oars, which was objectively just a better, more expensive version. A given, the triremes still were deployed because they're agile, they're fast, you can make them more quickly, so it's nice to have more options in your fleet. But already when we talk about the beginning of the First Punic War, when Rome is facing Carthage and Rome understands how powerful Carthage is when it comes to their navy, then the Roman Senate constructs a fleet made of 100 quinqueremes and 20 triremes. It's actually very interesting how Polybius tells us that the way they built these quinqueremes was by recovering a Carthaginian shipwreck, use it as a blueprint to retro-engineer the technology. The Romans were... But yeah, triremes in this century is insane.
In the 4th and 5th century, the ballista was the most powerful weapon. The ballista was just like the Roman scorpion, but better and stronger. In the 6th and 7th century...
Okay, well, I'm just going to skip that one because, I mean, we already established a few things. I suppose if you're interested, I could make a dedicated video to Roman and Greek war machines, and Sicilian, in fact, war machines, early war machines in the classical antiquity. We could talk about energy storage, capacity of the torsion of early models as opposed to more complex models, how they built reinforced frames, the bronze washers that are typical of these sort of early catapults. So there's a lot we can say about the components and how they worked, but perhaps I'll make a dedicated video, I suppose, so this one is not an hour long. 6th and 7th century, go.
The Greek fire was the most powerful weapon. Greek fire was an incendiary weapon used by the Byzantine Empire, particularly in naval warfare. It was a liquid that could be sprayed or hurled at enemy ships, igniting on contact and burning fiercely even on water. The exact composition of Greek fire was a closely guarded secret, but it was said to include a mix of flammable substances like petroleum, sulfur, and quicklime, creating a substance that was difficult to extinguish and highly effective in combat. I
do not understand all the memes, by the way. I have no idea, so let me know in the comments. All right, when it comes to Greek fire, the only thing I'm going to say is this. It's true that we don't know what it was made of. There are some ideas. I might create a dedicated video, but the one thing that I would like to say that I know for sure right now without even looking at my notes is the fact that it was a very unstable compound, and the reason being that Byzantine sources of the period say that it should never be transported or carried by wagon because it could ignite. 8th century.
8th century, the catapult was the most powerful weapon. The catapult was a type of ancient siege engine used for hurling large projectiles at enemy fortifications. It operated on the principle of stored energy, usually using tension, torsion, or gravity to launch.
No, the trebuchet used gravity or a payload. Catapults used store energy.
Its payload. Catapults came in various forms, including the ballista, which was like a giant crossbow, and the onager, which used a sling to launch projectiles.
I don't think onagers had the double arm, actually. That was the whole thing. It was simpler mechanism, so you wouldn't require double arms. Also, that's what I wanted to say earlier on when it comes to nomenclature. In the sources, it gets really complicated. And when you read books about this, the problem is that people will call a Scorpio, will call it a catapult. Sometimes a catapult is used for stones. Other times a catapult can be used for arrows. But then wouldn't that make it a ballista? But then the ballista can also have stones. Like, it gets really complicated in the sources. Just putting it out there.
In the 9th century, the Viking axe was the most powerful weapon. The Viking axe was a crucial weapon and tool for the Norse warriors of the Viking Age. It was a versatile tool used for chopping wood as well as a deadly weapon in combat.
Right.
Viking axes had a single-handed design.
Okay, no, I have too much to say. I'm gonna forget. Of course, the first one that we saw, very fantasy, clearly double-headed axe is not a typical Viking axe at all. You could find it in ancient Greece. Minoan maybe saw something like this, but the way we see it associated to the Vikings is it is what it is. Also, this mentioned that they were used both as tools and as weapons. Sure, you could do it, but generally the tool ones are thicker, the ones used for war are thinner. Now, clearly you can use anything. I could use this to whack someone in the head, so of course you can use a tool axe, but then again, it would be more unwieldy, and you don't really need all of that thickness because you're not trying to cut through timber, you're cutting through the epithelial human tissue. So in that case, a much thinner bearded axe will work much better against a human body as long as they are unarmored. But then again, using a thinner blade to chop wood might break it more easily. They can be used. You can use them interchangeably, but there are some disadvantages. It can be counterproductive.
Weapon in combat. Viking axes had a single-handed design with a relative...
That is not a single-handed design. That's a Dane axe and a double-handed. So and also, I don't know why we still read the catapult on top. I think the picture is wrong. So he was reading the AI and just wrote on Google Viking axe, and they gave him a Dane axe, and that's absolutely two-handed, as you can see.
Relatively short handle, allowing for quick and agile strikes in battle. These axes were integral to Viking warfare, providing warriors with a reliable and effective weapon on the battlefield.
Okay, so the axe is absolutely one of the weapons of choice of the Norse. With that being said, the spear was still the most common. So if I really had to choose one weapon to be the representative of Norse warfare, I would choose the spear. Second, I would put an axe. And then third, I would put the Viking swords, simply because those would be more expensive, a lot more expensive, and therefore relegated to upper echelon, very successful warriors, kings, earls. They would be the ones that hold the fancy swords, also as a way to represent their status in society. But when it comes to the average Viking, or should I say Norse warrior, give him a spear, give him an axe. I think those are good examples. 10th century, what's it going to be?
In the 10th century, the longship was the most powerful weapon. The longship or longboat was a type of ship used by the Vikings for trade, exploration, and warfare during the Viking Age. It was long and narrow, designed for speed and agility, with a shallow draft that allowed it to navigate rivers as well as open seas. Long ships were clinker-built, with overlapping planks held together by iron rivets. They were propelled by oars and a single square sail, making them highly maneuverable. In the
Okay, so once again, I find it odd, but it's the AI, of course, to choose ships as a weapon. I would rather focus on weapons used on battlefields, but in general, yeah, 10th century, those, usually you see them called drakar. I believe the correct word would be drekar. Once again, I'm not an expert. In fact, let me know of Old Norse. Let me know in the comments below. They are a very useful and well-made type of ship. It reminds me so much of the 500 plus hours that I put in Valheim. It's just that I think the AI might have needed some different prompt in order to avoid this, because honestly, yeah. Let's see 11th century.
In the 11th century, the battering ram was the most powerful weapon. The battering ram was a siege weapon used to break down the doors or walls of fortifications during ancient and medieval warfare. It typically consisted of a large, heavy beam with a metal head, sometimes shaped like a ram's head, suspended by ropes or chains. The ram would be repeatedly swung or thrust against the target until it gave way. Battering rams were often mounted on wheeled frames to allow for easier maneuverability and were used in conjunction with other siege engines and tactics to breach enemy defenses. In the 12th century, the siege tower was the most powerful weapon. The siege tower was a massive, multi-story structure on wheels, used to approach and scale the walls of fortifications during medieval sieges. It housed soldiers who could engage defenders from its elevated platforms, and featured ladders or drawbridges to access the battlements. Siege towers played a pivotal role in overcoming fortified...
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that is beautiful. Look at the minis. I love minis. I still have to find a way to display them in my office, in my new office.
...defenses, allowing attackers to breach walls and enter enemy strongholds. In the 13th century, the trebuchet was the most powerful weapon. The trebuchet, a medieval siege weapon, used a counterweight mechanism to propel projectiles. It was highly effective in breaching fortifications due to its ability to launch heavy...
Note how the AI contradicts itself. Earlier on, we were told that the catapult used the counterweight as a weapon, so using gravity. Then we're told that the trebuchet is a catapult. Now we're told that the trebuchet uses, in fact, the counterweight. That's why you can never really trust AI when it comes to this. And even on a linguistic note, a few days ago, I was actually reviewing a few words in Japanese and I wanted to check the pitch. So before asking the AI, because usually I do use these language models for language training. That's all I use them for, I'll be honest with you, in translation. But in general, I was asking it to give me the pitch, and it gave me the pitch, but I tried a few words that I knew the pitch of, and the AI messed up. So then I corrected it, and of course, it gave me now the correct answer, like, oh yeah, you're right, this is a different pitch. They are fallible, and therefore having these models write your entire script, as you can see, this script is a mess, makes zero sense to me. Once again, I understand the desire to put out as much content as possible, as quickly as possible, but then again, I post every day, so it can be done. It takes a lot of work, but believe me, in the long run, it will pay out to make sure you do your research and you write your scripts on your own, rather than the AI, because this is what it is.
Heavy objects over long distances with great force. The trebuchet played a significant role in medieval warfare, especially in sieges, where it was used to target walls, buildings, and defenders. In the 14th century, the crossbow was the most powerful weapon. The crossbow, a medieval ranged weapon, features a horizontal bow.
Not necessarily medieval, crossbows have existed. There is an ancient Greek prototype that is kind of similar, more like a belly bow, not exactly the same, but I mean, ancient Chinese, they had crossbows very early on, way before the medieval period. We're talking like 1st, 2nd century, even repeating crossbows were a thing. So if you're a Warhammer Fantasy player and you like your Dark Elves with their repeating crossbows, well, the Chinese had them. So yeah, the crossbow is not a medieval weapon, but it becomes popular in the Middle Ages, sort of comes back and is improved and has a high poundage, and is very famously connected to mercenary forces like the Genoese crossbowmen, for example, which is probably what he's talking about, to be fair.
Mounted on a stock. Its design allowed for greater power and accuracy compared to
Minecraft?
Traditional bows, making it popular.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, the AI is a mess. The crossbows don't necessarily have better accuracy than bows. That's nonsense. They do have some advantages over bows. You can train a crossbowman a lot more, like in 4 weeks, whereas training a longbowman takes years, and that is because you need to develop the muscle to be able to even pull the string of the bow up to, because from a medieval perspective, you need to be able to pull a war bow all the way back to your ear, and that requires a lot of muscle that is put together over many, many years of training. With a crossbow, you don't need to do that because the energy is stored mechanically. With that being said, a longbowman or an archer can shoot a lot more times than a crossbowman, because a crossbowman, it takes a little longer to reload. But another advantage is that with a crossbow you can keep your bolt in tension, whereas with a bow, well, they do it in the movies when they are having a conversation and they are holding it like this throughout the entire time, but you would tire very quickly. You can't really hold, particularly a medieval war bow, for that long without having to release at one point. With a crossbow, you can hold them similarly to like you do with a modern firearm. You can point and threaten someone. There are pros and cons, but the idea that crossbows were inherently more penetrative than bows or more accurate, if we go into the pound by pound force, longbow versus crossbow, it's gonna need a series of videos because it's a massive debate.
Among infantry and knights. The crossbow played a pivotal role in battles and sieges, providing soldiers with a lethal means to engage enemies from a distance. In the 15th century, the longbow was the most powerful weapon. The longbow is a type of bow that is tall, roughly equal to the height of the person who uses it.
I want to say this is probably the only one that makes sense. But saying that in the 15th century, the longbow was the most powerful weapon is finally something that could make sense because of the power behind these kind of bows.
Allowing for a long draw length and therefore more power and greater range compared to shorter bows. It played a significant role in medieval warfare, particularly in the battles of the 100 Years' War between England and France. Longbows were used by English and Welsh archers to devastating effect, able to penetrate armor and reach long distances.
Able to penetrate armor is massively controversial topic. It depends on the armor. Could a longbow penetrate mail? Yes. Could it penetrate plate? Usually no, unless we are talking about, because very much has to do with the distance, of course, but generally speaking, English archers, and in general medieval archers, would shoot you at point blank. Like, they would shoot you at close range. Of course, they would start at long range, but a lot of the arrows that were thrown onto people were at relatively short range. An English archer would usually try to hit a French knight in the face if the visor is lifted. They would try to hit you where you were less armored because they were extremely accurate. And when they did hit you in the middle of the breastplate, you would usually just go off. It wouldn't penetrate. And there were a lot of elements of the armor that longbow couldn't penetrate. It could penetrate thinner sections of the armor. It could penetrate, for example, the side of the visor. We have period sources that mention specifically that worry the knights had. There were lucky shots, of course, but just the idea all longbows could just penetrate armor is wrong. In fact, the Battle of Agincourt, which is one of the most famous battles in medieval warfare, where we have English longbowmen against French heavy cavalry in full plate armor, is indeed one of the battles with the highest number of prisoners, because the knights that were charging against the English, even though they were shot hundreds of times, they survived. Why? Because plate armor works. Yeah.
Making them a formidable weapon on the battlefield.
Yeah.
In the 16th century, the arquebus was the most powerful weapon. The arquebus was an early firearm that appeared in the 15th century and was used until the 17th century. It was a long-barreled gun with a matchlock mechanism, making it one of the first firearms to have a trigger. The arquebus was effective against armor at short range, but it was slow to reload and often inaccurate. Despite its limitations, it played a significant role in changing the nature of warfare, leading to the decline of traditional melee combat and the rise of firearms on the battlefield. In the
interestingly enough, the early firearms already, when in China, they happened very early with very early bombards and rockets, but then again, those didn't have much of an impact militarily as much as firearms would, or early firearms would, in the medieval period. With that being said, already in the very early 15th century, in fact, the late 14th century is when you start having the first prototypes and the first types of maybe single-shot firearms, very primitive. Some look like small cannons or hand cannons, long tubes. But then single-shot pistols were started to be a thing, although then again, as he says, at short range, arquebuses and single-shot pistols were more effective against armor than they would, like at long range, they wouldn't even do anything. Also because a lot of the armor in the late 15th century, for example, was bulletproof. It was absolutely bulletproof. But what's interesting is that sometimes the sources actually tell us when you have a hand pistol to actually lay the muzzle against the breastplate or against the helmet of the person or the knight you are supposed to shoot, and after you touch, you shoot. This is why, this is because armor was very effective. So it's like you really need to shoot close range if it's a fully armored opponent. If they're not in full armor, then of course you can shoot them. Anyways, there's a lot to say about arquebuses. I want to see what he says for 17th. He's going to say musket.
17th century, the musket was the most powerful weapon. The musket, a shoulder-fired firearm, emerged in the 16th century and evolved from the arquebus. It became a staple of warfare from the 17th to the 19th centuries, used by infantry in massed formations. Muskets were muzzle-loaded, smooth-bore firearms initially operated by matchlock, then flintlock, and later percussion cap mechanisms. In the 18th...
Okay, so one thing to say here is it's interesting how when you look at the record, you do have a development from the arquebus to the musket, but what's important to underline is that the term musket initially just denoted a bigger, much heavier arquebus. And only then, afterwards, it denotes the sort of firearm that we consider now to be the musket. So the original musket was a sort of heavier arquebus, but then it will become the sort of firearm that he's describing.
In the 18th century, the artillery was the most powerful weapon. In the 18th century, artillery underwent significant advancements, with various types of cannons being the primary artillery weapons used. These cannons included smoothbore muzzle loading guns.
I'm just noticing now that the music... Sorry, that was my dogs. D&D group is here. I'm also just noticing that the music is Erika. Oh my gosh, yeah. Erika it is. I mean, I personally wouldn't use it, but if you really want to use it for the 20th century, mate.
Guns of different calibers and sizes, such as field guns, siege guns, and naval guns. They were mounted on carriages for mobility,
I love naval
used
ones.
in massed formations to deliver devastating volleys of fire.
Yeah, that's
and
not
played
18th
a crucial
century.
role in shaping the tactics and outcomes of battles during this period.
Right.
In the 19th century, the Maxim gun was the most powerful weapon.
No
the
idea what
Maxim
that
gun
is.
was the first recoil-operated machine gun, invented by Sir Hiram Maxim in the late 19th century. It was a fully automatic weapon that used the energy from the recoil to eject spent cartridges, reload, and fire continuously. The Maxim gun was a game-changer in warfare, providing a high rate of fire and sustained firepower that could suppress enemy positions effectively. It played a significant role in colonial warfare and World War I, influencing the development of modern machine guns. In the 20th and 21st century, the nuclear weapons was the most powerful weapon.
I agree.
Nuclear weapons are explosive devices that derive their destructive force from nuclear reactions, either fission, splitting of atomic nuclei, or a combination of fission and fusion, the joining of atomic nuclei. These weapons release immense amounts of energy in the form of a nuclear explosion, causing widespread destruction and long-term environmental effects such as radioactive fallout.
And also depends on the type of nuke, because already 20th century nukes, like the ones that like Fat Man and Little Boy that were used in Japan, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there were two different bombs, and one was plutonium-based and one was uranium-based. But even though when we imagine those, the 20th century sort of atomic weapons of mass destruction that were used were incredible, devastating, the sort of thermonuclear weapons that we have, and in general the atomic bombs that we have now, in comparison, the difference in destructive power to the ones that were used in the 20th century is mind-blowing, literally mind-boggling.
They have been used twice in warfare, during the
Right.
bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II.
Yeah, and he's mentioning the guy that is reported to have survived one, and then he literally chose the other city and got bombed again. Poor guy. But anyways, yeah, it is what it is. I mean, the AI did make a mess, which is probably really the reason behind this video, to kind of encourage people to not use AI to write their scripts, particularly when it comes to this. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. I had a good time anyways watching it and reacting to it, and I think it was a good opportunity to speak about some elements of military warfare that are interesting, and maybe at one point I'll put together a video like this myself. I think that could be an interesting thing. It's just that I will not use AI, and if it takes me a week to put together, it takes me a week to put together. In the meantime, I'll just post other videos. Anyways, thank you so much, noble ones, for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for my next daily upload. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye. Please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much.